සුබ සන්ධ්‍යාවක් වේවා ඔබ සියලු දෙනාටම. A very warm welcome to Plain Tear. දිනේ ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමේ මාතෘකාව වන්නේ Boys Were Their Gods, Pederasty, Institutionalized Homosexuality in Ancient Greece. Presentation එක කරන්නේ Chrishari Alwis Gunasekare. Chrishari කැලණිය විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ ඇයගේ උපාධියට Western Classical Culture එහෙම නැත්නම් ග්‍රීක රෝම ශිෂ්ටාචාරය පිළිබඳ අධ්‍යයනය කර ඇති අතර මේ දවස්වල ඇගේ මාස්ටර්ස් උපාධිය කරන්නේ ඉන්දියාවේ පොන්ඩිචෙරි විශ්වවිද්‍යාලය. Chrishari is someone who has always been enthusiastic about anything related to mythology and classical reception, and I'm sure this presentation will be an informative and interesting one. So Chrishari, I now hand over the presentation and the proceedings to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to begin my presentation with a general comment, that is homosexual practices in the ancient world. First of all, people underestimate how widespread these practices were and consider it to be some sort of a relatively new aspect. Whereas anthropologists and historians have managed to report what they believe only to be a very small portion of the varieties of homosexual customs and traditions that had existed in the ancient world. Secondly, there is a discernible pattern in the manifestation of homosexual practices. Mostly these are either with religious or connotations with regards to warfare. And they are socially structured as well, and this applies to Greek homosexuality, this particular system that I'm talking about, which is pederasty as well. So, Rochana, shall we move on to the next slide? So, first of all, I'll begin by defining what pederasty is. Its etymological roots, if we were to look at, comes from two Greek words, paios, meaning boy, and a derivative of eran, meaning to love. So essentially this forms, the word as a whole forms the meaning love of boys. And it refers to the ancient Greek custom of erotic relations between an adult man and an adolescent boy. If we were to look at the dynamics of this particular relationship, the adult is referred to as the erastes, or the lover, and he's a mature man, definitely above the age of 18 or rather 20 and above. And the adolescent boy, on the other hand, is referred to as the eromenos, or the beloved, and he is between the ages of 13 and 17 years. So the relationship itself is asymmetrical, mainly because of the difference in age between the erastes and the eromenos. And the expectation of having such a relationship was to transmit to the boy the adult's experience in every field, because the boy was in a formative stage of his life. He's what you call a potential citizen of the state, and in order to prepare himself to become an actual citizen, he needs to learn certain things. So the erastes taught and the eromenos learned. That is the basis of this relationship. And when we look at the terminology, paideia itself is called education. So pederasty and paideia. So it was entrusted, this education was entrusted to the relationship with the erastes. And this relationship also embodied a particular concept that we call kalos kagatos, or the beautiful and the good, meaning that the boy should cultivate beauty of the body and the goodness of the soul, which was the essence of human in terms of Greek, that is male perfection. So what they strived towards was for male perfection, and homosexual love in particular was thought to be enabling the development of these virtues and seen as the most effective way to cultivate this ideal of kalos kagatos. And the practice itself is confined to a particular social class, that is the elites or the freeborn. So the slaves, the freedmen, or the sons of freedmen, essentially those who could not enter the gymnasium, could not engage in this particular practice of pederasty. And considering the above aspect, the relationship had certain, demarcations. The relationship itself was erotic. However, the standard was that there should not be any actual sexual intercourse taking place between the couple in a technical sense, that is penetration. This was because to engage in anal sex or to submit oneself was considered degrading or demeaning to a free born person of high status and was associated with effeminacy. In addition, any and all sexual contact was usually initiated by the adult or the erastes. So this is again another point in which the relationship was asymmetrical because the eromenos was expected to remain the passive partner, indifferent and deriving no pleasure from the act. And it was under these conditions that this practice of pederastia was considered socially acceptable. Um, so as you can see already, this the definition of pederastia varies very much from how we understand the term homosexual. It was an expression of social or rather sexual freedom, but it was only accepted, socially accepted when it respected that particular code. And it should be noted that pederastic relationships sometimes did continue even after the boy reached the age of 17. And that fell into the category of pure homosexuality. So essentially, once the boy reached the age of 17, he was recruited into military training, and after that, he was by the time he's 20, he's reintegrated to the society as a full-grown adult. So by that time, he himself was expected to, engage in a pederastic relationship with a younger boy and continue this practice. So that exactly is like the definition of what pederastia is. So if we can move to the next slide, we can look at how this particular practice came to be. So it's considered very problematic because we have not been able to pinpoint a particular time in which the custom was initiated, and in fact seem to predate the existence of the city-state itself. However, there have been three speculations made regarding this. The first is the obvious religious association, or rather with mythology. Most of us are aware that there are certain myths which depict pederasty, such as Zeus and Ganymede, or Poseidon and Pelops, Apollo and Hyacinth, or even Heracles and Hylas. So pederastic myths are more often associated with cults of gods concerned with the gymnasium or the adolescents. And in fact, as you can see here, one of the most portrayed one is the myth of Zeus and Ganymede, where Zeus, in the form of an eagle, abducted the youth Ganymede, who later became his cupbearer. In the next slide, we are going to look at the second origin of pederasty is. So some believe pederasty to be a relic of the Homeric age. So for the Greeks, Homeric age was similar to how we regard the feudalistic age. So it was military in nature and consisted of a comradeship of warriors joined together in a very masculine environment. And due to the absence of women, it tended to become a very closed all-male system where even the sexual relationship was conducted in that parameter. So the society in a part of a society that engaged in constant warfare, pederasty developed out of erotic relationships between soldiers. So for this, one of the most well-quoted ones is the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus from Homer's Iliad. I think most of y'all might have watched Troy as a movie, but I would not take that as an example because it does not essentially portray this particular relationship. But in the Iliad, as well as in many other classical forms of literature, this is considered to be a pederastic relationship. So interestingly enough, in the image that you see, it's Achilles that is tending Patroclus's wound. So in terms of this image, there's been a very interesting debate. Some say that Achilles was the older or the Erastes, and Patroclus was the younger Eromenos. However, according to this image, you see that Patroclus has the beard. So usually it is the Erastes who has the beard, is signifying that he is older, whereas Achilles is like, he doesn't have a beard and appears very youthful with longer hair as well. So this relationship dynamic had been up to debate for long, and nobody has, made a settlement on a particular the relationship dynamic between these two. But in this image, it is Patroclus who is the older or the Erastes, whereas Achilles is the younger, the Eromenos. In the next aspect, the next speculation of the origins of pederasty, it is, I think, another old custom. Okay. So that pederasty began as a part of an initiation rite. So this had been practiced both in Crete and Sparta. Especially in Crete, they actually stylized a kidnapping of the Eromenos, and they led them outside the city, lived with them for 2 months. And after the rules and the obligations had been conducted, then they were returned to the city with a set of gifts, including military equipment, and then reintegrated as a part of the society. It's similar in Sparta. It's a multi-year system where a youth entered the system and then spend their time with the adults, learning to be true Spartans. So it's a part of the Spartan education system as well. So this the idea of a myth, alongside with this idea of pederasty as an initiation rite, it divides into 3 aspects. First, the separation, where the boy is separated from the group. Secondly, the period of segregation, where they lived apart from the community and in which they learned how to be a part of the society, which often included a sexual relationship between the two. And finally, the moment of reintegration, in which the individual is no longer, the boy is no longer a boy, he is an adult, and he is now ready to take on his role as a warrior, a husband, a father, and join the community. So these are the 3 speculated origins of pederasty. And now, interestingly enough, we look at what the sources or what literature and art tell us about pederasty. So, as I mentioned earlier, epic poetry or Homeric poetry is one of the best sources that we have. And I have on the slide a quote by Patroclus. When Patroclus dies, his spirit appears to Achilles, and this is what he says, that his wish is to be buried together with Achilles, in the sense where usually when you're buried together, it indicates a certain intimate relationship. So at the first reading of either the Iliad or the Odyssey, nobody would figure out that this relationship is a pederastic relationship. But on a closer reading, it shows that male friendship, which the intensity was different than the usual. Especially like Achilles and Patroclus, these are considered to be pederastic relationships and not a usual relationship between comrades. And especially in classical Greece, of Achilles and Patroclus were considered to be the heroic models for pederasty. And if you look at another sort of poetry, which is lyric poetry, Theognis from Theognis from Megara is one of the best examples that we have, because most of his fragments referred to a boy called Chironos. And how he advises this boy, how he attempts to court this boy, is all found in his poetry. And it's an important source because it explicitly, his poetry explicitly confirms what we know, that it is the duty of the Erastes to provide the Eromenos with a civic and ethical education. So as you can see in these lines, I will teach you the things, Chironos, that I myself learned as a child from the noble. As a father to his son, I myself will teach you noble things. So Theognis says to Chironos that he will teach him the traditional and the elite values, and it's a very clear affirmation of the pedagogical ethic concerned with pederasty. And next, we will take a look at another very interesting source, that is historical scripts and sculpture. So I've decided to combine these two, and form a single slide, because these two are related in a way. So in terms of historic evidence, a rather well-known couple was the pederastic relationship between Harmodius and Aristogaton. So Harmodius and Aristogaton were two lovers who, during the Pan-Athenic procession, killed a tyrant named Hipparchus. So many people attributed this to be an act of heroism, but both Thucydides and Herodotus say that the incident was actually a crime of passion. Hipparchus was in love with Harmodius, that is the Eromenos, and this had been the root of the problem. So in order to prevent Harmodius being taken by force, Aristogaton and Harmodius had decided to kill Hipparchus, to assassinate him. But for Athenians, these two were heroes because they freed the city from tyranny and refounded democracy. So, but interestingly enough, though I quoted both Thucydides and Herodotus in this case, the best evidence for this couple doesn't come from that, but rather the statues, that the pair of statues that you see. So it is interesting that, most of the time sculptures come as singles. So when they come as a double or as a group, it emphasizes a relationship. So in this case, it emphasizes the pederastic relationship. As you can see, Harmodius, he is younger. He doesn't have the beard. Whereas Aristogaton, you see him with the beard and even with the drape or like the toga. So that is how they are depicted. And these statues were first erected in the agora or the marketplace. So this is the place where people used to pass before they go to vote. So it also emphasized that, the idea of that this couple was the model of, democracy as well as, pederastic love. So it emphasized that. So what had happened to these statues was like the Persians had taken them away when they invaded Greece. And then Alexander the Great brought them back. However, they were later destroyed. So what we have at this moment, the original statues were bronze. So what we have at this point are the Roman copies of the original Greek statues. So next we are looking at, one of the most complicated sources that we have, which is philosophy. And one of the richest sources that we have available to us in that term is Plato's Symposium, which is a discourse on love. So the entire discourse is actually carried on in the terms of not about the love between a woman and a man, but rather between a man and a man. So first, there were several speeches made by several prominent Athenians. However, I've taken just a couple of quotes. So first of all, the courage to choose to act on behalf of his lover. So this is in reference to Achilles. As I said earlier, Achilles and Patroclus were idealized by the Greeks. So the lovers were expected expected to be committed and to be devoted, especially loyalty unto death in the case of Achilles and Patroclus. And that the commitment and the devotion was expected within, they were expected to act honorably and in any given circumstance to mutually ennoble each other. So as you can see, one of the other references in this term is the sacred band of thieves. I think many of y'all might have heard of this, where a particular army was formed by lovers alone, because they had this belief that lovers would fight harder for each other to protect each other. So that's why they say, like, no one is such a coward that he cannot be inspired into courage. And similarly, as you can see in the last quote, neither family bonds, no public status, no wealth, no anything else. So this act, or the institution of pederasty itself, was associated with valorized virtues and attitudes such as courage, honor, discipline, self-restraint, in addition to the role of guidance and education. So it's like this is the philosophy expresses the ideals of this system of pederasty. There are other sources such as comedy and forensic oratory, but due to time constraints and the complexity of those, I chose not to explore those. In fact, after that, I've selected one of the best sources available, which is iconography. So when I call iconography, this is a visual media. So essentially, these are vast paintings that we have available. So I plan to display several alongside the discussion. So first of all, what you're seeing is one of the most common depictions of pederastic relationships that we have available in pottery. So there are two this is a courtship scene, and there are two courtship iconographies, and these make up the most of what we have available in terms of iconography. So the first one you're seeing here now is what we call the up and down gesture. So here you see the bearded Erastus. He fondles the genitals of the Eromenoi and touches him on his cheek. So that is why it's called the up and down gesture. So this is a traditional courtship gesture, and it reveals the sexual nature of this relationship. And secondly, the other courtship scene that I was talking about, Rochana, can we look at the next slide? Okay, so this is the courting gift scene, where the Erastus traditionally gives a gift. Usually it's an animal associated with the hunt, such as a hare or a cock or a stag. So the Erastus here in this depiction, you see the Erastus holding behind him his gift, a hare. And you see again the beard on the Erastus, whereas the Eromenoi or the Eromenos is the younger man, and he's receiving the gift. So this particular scene is associated with the hunt, the act of hunting, the valorized activity. So again, we are looking at another ideal of this particular relationship. And in the third picture that I'm showing you right now, this is a rather an uncommon scene, because acts of actual consummation is so rare in vase paintings. So intercourse itself appears only in very select vase paintings, and generally had been avoided by the painters. And in case where this had actually been depicted, it has been only intercrural intercourse that has been depicted. That is essentially the Erastus consummating the relationship by thrusting his penis between the partner's thighs. So there is evidence that pederastic couples had engaged in anal sex, but it hasn't it has been portrayed in a very limited sense. In this, I do not know whether it's clear or not, because this amphora that we are looking at had been damaged, but the central group, that is not the left or the right, but the couple in the center, we are seeing a scene of intercrural intercourse here. And the reason for this intercourse not being portrayed in vase paintings is because intercourse of any form was considered not to be very admirable. In fact, the relationship itself was idealized. So and that Eromene should not have any sort of sexual feeling for the Erastes. So as you can see in this, whereas all the Erastes in this grouping had been are visibly aroused, the Eromene are not. And then looking at the other image that we have, it's from red figure kylix, or what we call a wine cup. So this scene itself that is depicted is a symposium. It's a sort of a gathering where people, gather to discuss certain things while they drink. So it's symposium is associated with intellectual pursuits. And to indicate that pederasty is also associated with this, we see many pederastic scenes being depicted in the kylixes. So in this kylix particularly, both the inside and the outside would depict such relationships. And looking at the next one, so many pederastic scenes also appreciated masculine beauty. So the ancient Greek ideal, as described by Aristotle, was to be good in bodily excellence, such as stature, beauty, strength, fitness for athletic contests. So in this particular depiction, we see an Eromenos throwing a discus, and on the side you can see a small inscription which reads Kleomelos Halos, meaning Kleomelos is beautiful. So these Halos inscriptions, or the beautiful inscriptions, come in two forms. One is the form that we see here, such as with the name and color saying this Kleomelos is beautiful, or rather Ho Pi Kalos, meaning which this boy is beautiful. Okay, so this is so there were many depictions of such beautiful boys in Attic pottery as well. So in conclusion, if I were to sum up what I've said so far, that pederasty was a male-only relationship between an older man and an adolescent youth, and was confined to a particular class of the society. So we have gender-defined, age-defined, as well as status-defined. And then the institution had its roots on respective religious beliefs and initiation customs, and was sexual in nature, but the ultimate goal was not sexual fulfillment, but that of personal betterment. So it was to be mutual ennoblement. And it was also not exclusively homosexual, because the men were expected to marry and produce children. So the sources that we looked at, the available sources, cast pederasty in a very idealizing light, portraying it as a part of a world where beautiful males display praiseworthy attitudes such as moderation, engaged in valorized activities such as hunting, athletics, and the symposium such as to show the intellectual pursuits. So I'd like to conclude my presentation by referring to the title that I've selected. It's a saying by Anacreon, a lyric poet. So when they asked him why he wrote poems or hymns to boys instead of the gods, he said that because boys are our gods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chrishari. That was a really interesting presentation. So I think we can end now. So good night, everyone, and stay safe and healthy given the current situation in the world. Stay safe, Chrishari. Okay, all right. So I'm going to end the meeting now. Good night. Stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Good night, and thank you.